Hi everybody, welcome back for another Deal or No Deal. If you haven't seen one of these before, this is where I take an opportunity that's landed on my desk, I pull it apart, analyse it, crunch the numbers and make a call on it as whether it's a deal, whether it's almost a deal and we need to sharpen it up a bit, or whether it's just fit for the rubbish bin. What I do sometimes is I go back and have a look at an opportunity that landed on my desk some time ago and just check on it to see what happened. It might have sold, it might not have sold, just out of interest. This is one that's got a bit of a history and it's got a twist right at the end, so hang around for that. Let's have a look at the site itself. So here it is, it's 814 square metres in 2 lots. It could be a splitter if we wanted to go that way, cut it into 2 lots, already 2 lots. So 814 square metres. It's zoned for 2 or 3 level construction. 20.2 metres wide and 40.3. It is a corner block, if you can't tell from that. It is a corner lot, 20.2 on one frontage, 40.3 on the other. It has full approvals. It's got a development permit and it has a building permit, or if you're New South Wales, a construction certificate. So pretty much ready to rock and roll into construction. Now, price guide, $930. I first saw this one almost 2 years ago, and it came on the market at an asking price of $850. I've just checked on it recently, and there it is at $930. There is a story behind this, and we'll get to that at the end. So when I first see that, what are my first thoughts? I'm thinking, okay, what's the price? It's a 6-pack. It's got a 6 townhouse, got an approval, and they want $930. I always bring it back to a townhouse component. That's the land component per townhouse. They want $930 for it. It's got an approval for 6. If you divide that in, it's about $155 a townhouse. Now, that means something to me. If you have a patch and you're familiar with that area, you'll have a pretty good idea of what the land component is for a typical townhouse in that area. And I'm thinking that area, it's an average area. I'm thinking what I know about it, that looks a bit high. I'd have to say that. What I don't know without further investigation is it a 2-storey townhouse or a 3? Because that does make a difference to this number. Because 3-storey townhouses are more expensive to build than 2-storey, and therefore the land component needs to be less because the sale price is about the same. It's like water in a level, you know. So I'm thinking first up, it looks a bit expensive to me, but hey, let's carry on. And selling for $590 a townhouse. Now, that area is an average area, and I'm thinking at the time, that's what I had a quick look. Not a lot of new stock being sold, but what there was around the 570 mark. And I'm going in, well, okay, market's looking okay. I'm going to go in at 590. So that's my first couple of thoughts. 155 land content per townhouse, and the townhouses are going to sell for around 590. So we'll get down to crunch some numbers in a little while. But in the meantime, let's just have a look at this. So there's an aerial view. And as you can see, it is a corner lot. So we've got a street here, we've got a street there. So that's the 40 odd metre frontage, that's the 20 metre frontage. What can we tell from that? Well, we can tell there's already some development across the road. Looks like some townhouses there on the other corner. And also down here, there's been a development next door, probably more townhouses as well. So let's have a look what we have from there. Street view, okay, this is having a look at it. Well, as we can see, not the most attractive house in the world. That was built around 1950. So it's a 70-year-old house. They're the townhouses that we saw next door from the aerial view. These are the ones across the road that we also saw. And, I've got a couple of posts here. Look at that on 2 frontages. That's interesting. I guess, the wires go one way, then they go the other way. You don't often see that. But there again, the entry's not going to be off the corner, so it's not going to be a problem. We're not going to have to move the posts for a driveway. We can see that there is some slope down in this direction. We can't quite tell the other direction, so we'll need to have a look at the contour plan in due course. But there is some slope on that block. It is of an age that would be okay to demolish in that area, so that's not going to be an issue. So here's another view. Oh, okay, now we're having another look from the long street. Remember the 40 metre frontage? And there we can see, they're the ones next door, those townhouses next door. They're the 2 power poles that we looked at a bit earlier. And So what we're seeing here is it slopes in this direction, which we already knew from the other photo. It also slopes in that direction. So it's sloping backwards in two directions. Not my preferred slope. In fact, my preferred slope would be like 1 degree, just enough to get stuff to flow. But anyway, it is what it is. So let's go from there. Let's have a look at the site itself, characteristic-wise. Okay, location, 900 metres to shops, 500 metres to cafe, 200 metres to school. That could be a good thing. And 800 metres to the train station. To me, that is the most important asset. 800 metres is fine, that's a walk. I think, you know, anything up to maybe a kilometre is a pretty easy walk. And so within 800 metres of transport. Transport's very important. And so I like that. These other things, yep, they're okay, but 800 metres to the train station, that is a positive thing. Zoning wise, now we already know that it has a development permit and a building permit, but let's just have a look anyway. So zoning map, there it is there. So there's the lot, it's a corner. That particular colour tells me that that zoning is 2 or 3 level construction, and we already know that. There's another one next door. We didn't actually pick that up from any of the camera angles. So there's townhouses there. There's a couple of, there's 4 there. That's like 2 duplex pairs. These ones over the road actually were separately titled. That's that other townhouse development there. So it is the right zoning for townhouses. Obviously, it's got an approval. Contour plan. Now, this is interesting because that's what we're trying to get a grab on before was the slope, because slope means extra cost on construction without getting any more money when you sell them. So the fall here, now each one of these lines is a metre. It's a metre contour. And you might not be able to read these numbers, but that's 34 metres, 33, 32, 31, and as we go. So the actual slope is in this direction. From here, almost diagonal, well, not quite diagonal, it's about that direction there. From the high point to the low point in that direction. That's not great for construction. Obviously, you can still build, but there's going to be a few issues there. Size-wise, we saw that before, 20.2, nice rectangle, 40.5. It's a good size block, you can do plenty with it. Now, in regards to sewer and water, so here we go. Now, that's the lot. I've hatched it in blue just to make it more obvious for you. This is one street here. So what we've, and one street there, okay? So that's one street, 2 streets. What we've got there is, there's a red line there. You might not pick up, that's the sewer. And it has what we call a jump up. That's a sewer connection in that bottom corner. That's the lowest corner of the block, and that's where the sewer connection is for the house at the moment. So we'd use the same sewer connection for the townhouses, and so that sewer's not a problem. Usually with corner blocks, you don't have too much problem with services. They're easier because you've got 2 frontages, you know. The blue line which runs along here, that's the water. And it's on the other side of the road, but there is a line running across to the existing house. What you'll probably find is that line that runs across from the main to the house will be fine to service a house, but won't be large enough to service 6 townhouses. And so that pipe will have to be upgraded from what's probably around an 18 mil pipe up to something like 40 or 50 mil. And that can cost $5,000 or $6,000 to do that. If you think about it, it's only $1,000 a townhouse, so it's not a deal killer, it's just a cost you have to incur. From a stormwater point of view, this is the lot here. That drainage plan, that's the one next door. So we're going to be able to get discharge. Now you can't see any pipes there, and the reason is that just off there, there's some piping down the hill, and so we'll be able to discharge into the curb and it'll flow down into a gully trap down the road. So getting stormwater discharge, once again, because it's a corner lot, it's pretty easy, and we'd be discharging off that lowest point into the curb down here. So that's not a problem either. And remember, these things would have been dealt with when the owner got the development approval. So let's have a look at design-wise, what do we got planned? So these aren't built, so we've got artist's impressions. So there we go there. Let's have a look at this. So this is looking, interestingly enough, they don't have the 2 power poles in there. That mightn't look as attractive with 2 big power poles in there, but that's okay. It's an artist's impression. They're not going to put stuff like that in there. So this is the long frontage. If you think that's the corner of the building down there, right? So that's the long frontage. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's six going that way. And this is the other 20-metre boundary. So obviously they're being built along the long boundary. Just chop them off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There they are there. Now remember, back to the slope. Remember the contour plan we had a look at before? And that was the slope. So what we have here, this is the long boundary. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 townhouses along the long boundary. But this is the highest point and that's the lowest point. So what we're probably going to end up doing, we're going to have to dig in up here and drop them. And down here, we may have to have some retaining and some fill because it's dropping off. And it's dropping off about 3 metres. So their metre contours, that's sort of a half, 1.5, 2.5, plus a half's 3. So it's a 3 metre drop across a building. So that's not great. That's why we've got to dig in here. Remember, these ones up here, in spite of the artist's impression, artists make it look good, probably a couple of metres down there. So the actual ground level, it will be looking at retaining walls. And down here, they'll be perhaps up on either suspended or retained and filled, which means compaction of fill. It means more expensive footing. So everything about it is looking expensive from a build point of view. Let's have a look at a cross section. I always like to have a look at these. Remember, it does have an approval, so we can look at the plans. So what we got here is a cross section. It's like you had a knife and you made this big slice right through and opened it up, and that's what you'd see. Now, the reason I'm interested in the cross section is to have a look at the fall. Because remember, this is the long boundary, so it's falling in this direction. It's also falling in the other direction at the same time. So what we're seeing here is steps. See these steps? They're all steps. This all costs money. Because what you're doing, you've got a slab, then it steps down to another slab, steps down to another one, steps down to another one, steps down to another one. All these steps, for a start, the ground all has to be cut properly and benched. And then these footings all have to be dug. And there's quite a bit of work in stepping footings, both from, if you can imagine, these footings have to be either bricked up or shored up. The steel, just connecting all the reinforcing. There's a lot of work in there for the concreters. There's a lot of work in there for the reinforcing people. Every time you do these steps, it makes it more and more expensive as you go. And of course, because you've got steps in the footing, steps in the slabs, you've got steps in the roof. And so every time you step a roof, you're creating more roofing drama in terms of, ceiling and barges and all that sort of stuff. So it just makes it more complex. You have to do it. It just adds cost. When you're adding cost to a building like this, and there's more costs to come that we'll have a look at, you don't get it back when you sell. No one's going to pay more for that townhouse because it cost you more to build because you had to step the footings and do this and do that. And so if you can't get it back when you sell, the only chance you've ever got of getting that extra cost back, that extra construction cost back, is when you buy the land. So if construction costs you more because of a whole heap of design issues, you can't sell them for any more, you have to get the land cheaper in order to get the proper development margin. And that's the issue, because often the owner of the land doesn't understand that. All they know is they got a development approval for 6 townhouses. So that's what we're picking up there. So just from a bird's eye view, if you like, this is the site plan. So as you can see, that's the long street boundary there, short street boundary here. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a little bit interesting. These are all straight lines, the party walls. Over here, the wall goes down and out and down. That's actually creating a few issues, because what's happening is Unit 1 is part of it is built over the car parks of Unit 2. And you can do that, but what that creates is a more complex building. These are Class 1 buildings. They're simple, Class 1 like a house. Easy framing, everything's Class 1. When you get down to building a having a building over things like car parks and that, and particularly car parks owned by the guy next door, it becomes a Class 2 building. And the construction is heavier and more expensive. Now, we'll have a look in a moment, but what would happen there with this Class 2 building is, if you imagine this unit here, it's 3 levels. And so when you got the floor of the second level is the ceiling of the first level, and on you go, that's okay. Because they're contained and you've got a block party wall, they can just be a timber floor. Probably timber joists, timber flooring. That's, relatively inexpensive. When you've got a Class 2 building down here, that floor is suspended concrete, and that's the way they've designed it. Now, suspended concrete is expensive, and so it's added another complexity to the floor design. It's added extra cost, and you've got extra trades. The flooring here would be the carpenter, builders. Flooring down here is, once again, concreters, but then you've got all the form work and everything that has to go in, and the extra time to lay concrete slabs. So that's added another cost to it. So here we go. Anyway, let's just have a look at a typical floor plan just for our interest. So we'll pick this one up here. So in this case, we've got a single garage. A couple of these have a double, but most have a single. So normal entry, single garage, bedroom downstairs with its own ensuite. That's not a bad thing. That could be good, for teenage children, or good for rental as well. If you're keeping one of these and you're renting them out, somebody's got a self-contained bedroom down there, that get some good extra rent for that. And then a deck out the back, private garden. When we go up one more level, so we come up the stairs, typical sort of format. We've got a kitchen here with an island bench. We've got living and we've got dining over here. Powder room, which is important. I need a toilet on that level. That's okay. I mean, these are sort of basic. And upstairs is the second and the third bedroom. So the third bedroom here has its own ensuite, and the second one has its own ensuite. So we ended up really with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, plus a powder room. Now look, they would be good for renting. For somebody to rent, to have their own room and their own private bathroom, they would be a good renter. That's a positive thing. From a cost point of view, you've basically got 4 wet areas. You've got 3 full-blown bathrooms and a powder room, so extra cost, but then, from a rental point of view, it's not too bad. And so there we are, that's the 3 levels. Now the other thing is, it is 3 levels. And 3 levels cost more than 2 levels. Let's just have a look now at the construction cost issues, remembering that all this extra money that we might be spending on building these townhouses, we're not getting any more when we sell them. And so the only way we can make our profit is by taking these extra costs off the land value, if it was compared to a really simple block. So here we go. Here's a few of the issues. Now it is 3 levels. If you're talking about a townhouse, let's say roughly 150 square metres, the difference between building 150 square metre 2 level and 150 square metre 3 level, the difference is about $30,000 more for the 3 level. It runs out at about $200 a square metre more. But you tend to not get any more when you sell them. In fact, if anything, you're limiting your market a little bit, because people over 50 generally aren't real keen on 3-level townhouses because of the stairs. Notwithstanding that, they cost about $30,000 more. A few other issues, step footings, we had a look at that. There's 4 different steps in the footings. And the slabs, there's 5 levels of slab. All of this adds cost. It adds cost for earthworks, it adds cost for concreters, for reinforcing, and we saw what that means. We've got to step up into the roofs. And that's more carpentry, more plumbing, more roofing. There's a number of retaining walls, because as I said, we've got to dig out one corner, we've got to push the earth down this way, that has to be retained. Because of that slope, and particularly because of that cross slope. It's not just the slope in the long boundary, it's the slope laterally as well. And that just adds all extra cost in there. Remember that we've got a mix, we've got a couple of Class 2 buildings in there that requires suspended slabs. And there's also extra fire rating because of the core fill block walls that actually have to go into those units 1 and 2. And interestingly enough, unit 1, I wondered, the garage seemed to be a bit short when I was looking at the floor plans. And I measured it. The normal garages are about 5.8 to 6 metres long and 3.2 wide. This one was only 5 metres long. And I don't know how they actually got it through. but it is, and it's approved. It's a 5-metre garage. Now, if you've got a little, a little Hyundai Getz or some little small car, 5 metres is fine. But what if you've got a 4-wheel drive? A lot of people have 4-wheel drives these days. A lot of people have, utes and all sorts of things, and they're not going to fit in there. Those cars are like, 5.5 metres long. And so we've got this useless garage, which is fine, I suppose, if you sold it to somebody with a little car, but then, what if you can't? That's a problem. So all these things cost extra. So let's have a look at the numbers. That's where we're up to. And the timber frame decks as well. The decks at the back are actually off the ground because of the slope, and so it costs more to build suspended timber decks than it does just to drop a slab on the ground. So that's just another thing. Okay, let's have a look at these. So as we said earlier, we're allowing $590,000 per townhouse. The land component, this is per townhouse, okay, because that's sort of the way we think. At the end we can multiply everything by 6, that's okay. Now the land component, including legals and stamp duty, is about $160 per townhouse. I put the construction in at $330 plus GST. I'm probably being a little bit kind with the build cost at the moment. When I consider all those extras that have to go into it, I wouldn't be surprised if it's up on that, but I'm going to keep it tight at $330. Consultants fees, not much per townhouse because we've already got a development permit and we've got a building permit. So we've just got a little bit during construction. Council fees, they don't miss you, particularly on contributions in this council. Finance, this is expensive construction. There's quite a few dollars involved here, so that's the finance. Marketing, roughly about 3% we often work on. GST, you might think, gee, GST is really low. And the reason it's low is when you get a project, and we'll have a look in a minute, that doesn't make a lot of profit, there's not much GST to pay because your costs are almost equal to your sale price. So that's why that's so small, and we'll see why in a minute. Miscellaneous, just all those little bits and pieces that add up that aren't big enough to have their own title, okay? So there we are. What do you think? Let's have a look. Bingo, okay. So total costs, add all these up, $570. We're selling for $590. We're making the grand sum of $20,000 profit, which is a 3.5% margin. Obviously, what's the conclusion about that? It's a dead duck. We'd be wanting 18-20% there, and so this is nowhere near working. So the obvious conclusion, it's a rubbish bin job. But let's just have a little bit further, rather than just pull up there and say, let's throw it into the bin. Because I had a look at this a while ago. Remember when it came in? I said it came in at $850. I checked on it again. Yeah, this is wood duck country. And I'm going to show you a bit about wood ducks in a moment. The land, to get an 18% margin, which is sort of the minimum you'd want, I'd rather 20, but even 18 is a bankable deal, you'd have to get the land for $540. They want $930. They want $400,000 more than what it's worth. And as a house, it's a pretty ordinary old house. It might scrape in at close to $540. So here's a situation where you've got a sort of a crappy old house on a decent, well, half-decent block of land that's probably worth about that number. And then someone's gone all the trouble of getting DA and everything else and think they're going to make a fortune. They've actually added no value at all. That's all it's worth as a house. That's all it's worth as a site. And so I'd rather just sell it easy as a house. But the problem is it's been put out there as a development site, and it's been put out there at $930,000. I want to show you a bit of history because this sort of thing got me thinking. Because remember, it came on at $850, and now I'm seeing it back almost 2 years later at $930. So I did a bit of digging. This is what I found. Back in July 2014, it sold for $755,000. Now, there's no way that house was worth anything near that in 2014. Somebody bought it, quack, quack, probably a wood duck, thinking, oh, okay, so does have development potential, so I'll pay more than what it's worth as a house, and that's fine, we do that all the time. And so they paid $755,000 in July 14. Now, for some reason, a year later, they sold it to somebody else for $790. I don't know why they did. there's no development application was lodged in that time, but I think what might have happened is they did a lot of homework on it, realised that they were a wood duck, they bought a lemon, and so they've dumped it back on the market with, and guess what? Quack, quack, now someone else comes along. They bought it for $7.90. The crew that bought it were called Creative Home Improvements. So if they're watching, bad luck. But it's on RP Data. It's public knowledge, so nothing there. I just found the name pretty interesting, particularly when you see what happened after that. So they picked it up in August 15. In October 15, 2 months later, they lodged an application for 6 townhouses. So they obviously bought it to do a development. They were happy with, well, I imagine they were, they bought it, they were happy with paying $7.90. This guy got out of it for about a break even. If you think he paid legals and stamps, probably owes him $7.75 on that. He had commission to sell it. That would have, if he paid interest, this guy, he would have been losing money. If he paid cash, he probably broke even on that transaction. So now somebody else has come along, they paid $7.90. Now they've lodged a DA in October 15. In June, so 8 months later, they got it DA approved. They got their development approval 8 months later, and they've gone on apparently and got a building permit on top of that, which means much more advanced plans. So that was back in June 16. So they paid $7.90, would have paid probably 30 grand to get that, plus legals and stamps. So at this point, it's owing them $7.90 plus legals and stamps, probably about $8.20. Would have spent at least 30 on that, $8.50, $8.60. So it's probably owing them, even at the moment, $8.60 plus interest every day. But anyway, that's okay. What happens here? In March 2017, it's listed for sale. And so that's 9 months after they got their approvals. It's listed for sale. They had an amendment to the plans back in 17. They weren't big changes. There's just a bit of a floor plan change on a couple of the apartments. It's only minor stuff. Really, I don't think it did anything when I had a look at what the changes were. But we've got an amendment to a plan. It's listed for sale. So it was, all around that time they amended the plan. That's slightly out of sync, but they amended it, then they listed it for sale. The amendment was approved a couple of months later, so it's gone through, that's okay. So they made this amendment to the DA they already had. So they got the DA and they've listed it for sale and they made an amendment. Anyway, back at 19, so remember, nearly more than two and a half years later, oh there it is there, 967 days later, quack, quack, they sold it for $8.20. That's when I saw it. I saw it back in 19 when they wanted $8.50 for it. I did my numbers, realised never going to sell, and just put it aside. Somebody did buy it, so they paid $8.20 for it. Was listed. Now remember, August 15 paid $7.90. 4 years and 2 months later, sold for $8.20. Well, obviously that's a loss. If you think about it, legals and stamps and commission out the back end, that's about 40. It would have put them up. They would have lost 10 there plus all the interest. Probably lost $70,000, $80,000. Oh, they would have gotten some rent in the meantime, maybe, but not a lot on that place. They probably lost, I don't know, 50, 60 grand and 4 years of your life to sell it at $8.20. Anyway, game's not over yet. So after 967 days on the market, Quack Quack came along. So this is the third wood duck. So here we go, Quack Quack. February 2021, this was acquired and it was listed offers over 930. So it's back on the market at 930, having paid 820. Now they might think, well, that's a quick, like there's 110 less costs, might be about 70,000 profit. But the thing is, I think having bought it, they probably realised that it's a lemon. It's better if you find out if a deal's a lemon before you buy it, but there's some people who find out things are a lemon after they buy it. Not where you want to be. That's the whole reason I do these things. Listed for offers, and in March they had to get an extension to the DA because the development approval lasts for 4 years. and the 4 years had gone. So they did get an extension a month after. So they put it on the market with 1 month left on the DA. But they have got an extension for a couple of years. But the point is, and we just ran the numbers. So it never worked. I mean, it didn't work in 2014. Remember, it doesn't work at that price anyway. Plus, properties would sell cheaper back in those days. You know, here's an example of a property where, shall I say, 3 wood ducks, quack, quack, have gone through progressively 755, 790, 820, now asking 930. Doesn't work. You can ask 5 million if you want to. It's never going to work. What's it worth? Well, we had a look at it before. It's worth 540. That's what it's worth as a development site. And because it's such a crappy house, you'd be lucky it might be worth 540 as a house. There you go. And a lot of the problem, not all of it, a lot of the problems in the build, in the cost and everything in there, that's only some of the problem. It's the sale price, it's the GRV, it's only in the sort of 5s when you've got such a high bill cost. I'd rather a better area maybe where it's in the 7s and I could absorb that bill cost, even though I might pay more for the land. So it's got a bit to do with, what part of the market you're pitching to. So yeah, there's a lot of problems in there. But anyway, I hope you found that interesting. So once again, she's back in the bin. Catch you next time.